Live from Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show. Rebuilding America, together, investing, activism, and supporting the middle class. Now,
the progressive populist voice of politics.
Here's Jeff.
Good afternoon, Americans. Good afternoon, New York. This is the Jeff Santos Show. Welcome to it. We got a great show for you today. We'll talk with Gus Morales, Massachusetts Badass Teachers. Will give us a perspective of what is happening in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Front page of the Boston Globe today. More cuts at the city level, Boston Public Schools, and I'll hold up part of the Boston Globe and the photograph there, the Boston Common, just right across the street from where we broadcast from. That is, of course, Emerson College here in Boston. And a lot of people are concerned in Massachusetts about cuts, not only in the city level, but more charter schools that could potentially damage more people as well, students and teachers, and particularly in the urban centers of this Commonwealth as well. We will, of course, talk Bernie Sanders today. Big election in Michigan, and Jonathan Tasani, the essential Bernie Sanders author, and his vision for America. Will stop by at 4:34. He is in Florida today, ahead of the next week's primary, as well as the debate tomorrow night on Univision. And I guess CNN is also carrying that as well. We'll talk with Jonathan about all things Bernie Sanders, including the, once again, continuation of more and more. And this, to me, is the sad part. Sad but true who Hillary Clinton is. And, of course, who she is somebody who will do anything to win, and including misrepresenting Mr. Sanders' views on the automotive bailout, which he voted for, one of them, and the other one, they put money into it, which, of course, mainly a lot of it went to Wall Street. So that's what she's using to say he did not want to help you in Michigan. That's the way that they play loosely with the facts. But that's okay. People, I think, in Michigan should realize that, and if they don't, then they should listen to this show, because we'll have an opportunity to make sure the record is correct on all of that. Again, you can reach us at 772-925-8206. Email me, jeff@revolutionboston.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. One other issue that is going on today, of course, is the Republican side, and whether Donald Trump will succeed in Michigan. Not really the question, but I guess the question is by how much. Apparently, Governor Kasich of Ohio is doing very well. Another poll shows him tied with Mr. Trump in Ohio. And if that's the case, then, this thing could go on the Republican side for a while. Now, if Trump wins Florida, it's going to be very hard for Mr. Kasich to mount more than just a couple of more weeks, because then you go into New York and California, and I just don't think that Kasich is going to win in either one of those big states. Therefore, more than likely making Trump the next nominee of the Republican Party. It should be an interesting time in New York City if that's the case. We're talking politics here on the Jeff Santos Show, back with Gus Morales, Badass Teachers, Massachusetts, after this timeout. Welcome back. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you're tuned into. 772-925-8206. We'll get to callers in the next segment. But we start on our Teacher Tuesday segment, sponsored in part by our friends at both the American Federation of Teachers and Badass Teachers. He is a badass teacher. He is Gus Morales here in Massachusetts. Great to have him back on the program. Gus, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, my friend, anytime. So I pick up the Boston Globe today, and what I see on the front cover is more than 1,000 Boston public schools students marched to Common on Monday after walking out of classes to voice their objections to anticipated cuts in programs and teaching positions next year. For those viewing us online, that's what the front page of the Globe looked like today. So this is just one of the issues that we're going to talk about today, Gus. But this is an example of young students not only involved in the Sanders campaign, but involved in their own personal stakes, where themselves and their teachers, are going to have cutbacks in the city where the revolution was born in Boston. And, of course, that's part of a wider part of the cutbacks that we are seeing across the country. And on top of that, what is happening with, in my opinion, a very big piece of the puzzle when it comes to, Republicans and some Democrats, destroying the public school system. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. So first of all, somebody had already asked me about the whole Boston situation, and I simply just stated to them, what has started with the students across the country cannot be stopped. You can't undo what's happening now. It's just like the Vietnam-era protests. The students are waking up to what's happening to them. Nobody's including them in decision-making. Nobody's asking their opinion. Everybody treats the students like they're idiots, and I think that's been to the detriment of everyone. People have often asked me why my classroom runs so efficiently, how come the kids are so respectful, how come it seems like, I have such great classroom discipline. And I tell everybody it's very simple. I treat them like human beings. I treat them with all the respect I would afford another adult. I don't condescend them. I don't treat them, like idiots, which is essentially what a lot of the public school systems and what a lot of the politicians do, is they do these things to the students, and they never bother having, like, a forum. Let's say at Boston Public Schools, let's have a forum. Let's hear from the students. How is this actually going to impact them? Because it's easy to say that we're going to make cuts. I can say the words. You can say the words, Jeff. But it's very different saying the words than it is to actually implement cuts and affect people's lives. And you're not just affecting the students' lives, you're affecting the livelihoods of some of the teachers that are going to be cut as a result of these cuts. So the problem is compounded by so many other variables. But Philadelphia students are protesting. I mean, you got the Newark students in New Jersey protesting, locking down the streets. This is happening, and there's no stopping it now. So this wave of revolution, like you called it, you can see what's happening with Bernie Sanders. You can see where I live. You can see what's happening across the country. What is starting to unravel is there's no way of putting that back in the box. So it's happening. The students are really upset about the cuts. When their lives are affected, we're not just talking about they're missing one teacher that they like. We're talking about their entire lives are disrupted. For a lot of the students that we see in the inner city schools, and Boston has a lot of them, we have some out here where I live. What happens with these schools is those are second homes to these children. So they're not just schools. They're second homes. It's where they go for that other part of their day where they really feel at home, where they feel safe. And that's being taken away from them piece by piece with these cuts. So, I think in essence what we're seeing is the students starting to wake up.
Well, I tell you, it has to start, and good for them. I mean, it doesn't happen every day that 1,000 students walk out of any place in any part of this country. And look, I think it is the greatest thing that people are actually standing up to the authorities. We have seen the aspects of Governor Baker's views on public education, public transportation, and many other issues. And now, of course, in the charter schools. So, I mean, this is the case. And, of course, the students mentioned the fact that Marty Walsh the Democrat who was elected just a couple of years ago with a lot of progressive votes.
Yeah, this is a liar.
Exactly. And, basically has gone out and not done the right thing. And I think we are seeing, once again, more and more establishment politicians. And I'm afraid Marty Walsh was on this program just a few months ago, probably closer to a year now. But the fact is that, has basically, I think, left a big void from his progressive base. And I think a lot of people are getting very upset at him.
As Hillary Clinton. That's what I would say about that. He's as progressive as Hillary Clinton.
Well, if that's the case, then he might as well not even be progressive. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you got all these people taking the title of progressives. I consider myself a progressive, but my actions speak for themselves. Everything I do is about pushing forward the progressive agenda. Hillary Clinton, your Marty Walshes of the world, they're Democrats in name only. They're Dinos. Everybody knows the term. They might as well be Republicans. They're not doing anything to advance the progressive agenda. They cater to the middle, and the middle's full of a lot of people who don't necessarily see things being progressive. And not to make this about Bernie Sanders, but this is why I push so hard in advocating for Bernie Sanders. While I don't agree 100% with his educational stance, he needs some talking to about where exactly to make some points as far as the K-12 education and possibly higher ed and preschool. I still adopt many of his progressive ideals as my own. They're the same ideals that I share, that I have in my life. And so that's why I push so hard for it. So when we're talking about education and we see the charter school proliferation all across the country, and now they're trying to push that here in Massachusetts, and lo and behold, who's behind it? The Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education, the Gates Foundation, charter school advocates who have tons of money. So it's no surprise to me. They don't care about what happens to the kids. If they cared about what happens to the kids, they wouldn't have come up with the idea of charter schools. They would have just started funding the public schools that were already in existence. But instead, they wanted a workaround, something profitable. That right there is the biggest difference between charter schools and public schools. Public schools cannot profit. They don't profit in any way. So they're not valuable to them, to these people from the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education and people like that. The charter schools, however, they can make money on the curriculum. They can make money on the entrance fees. They can make money on so many different things, and there's money to be made. So when there's money to be made, all the vultures come out, and that's what we're seeing right now in Massachusetts. We've got our own secretary, chairman on the Board of Education, having meetings with Eva Moskowitz and people like Eva Moskowitz. And for your listeners who don't know who Eva Moskowitz is, she is the queen of charter schools in New York City. She runs the Success Academy.
Right.
They are a misery in existence to a lot of folks, but not enough of the word is out there because people refuse to cover these issues. The same mainstream media that promotes one thing will absolutely, completely ignore other plight, especially when it affects black and brown neighborhoods.
Well, that's the real tragedy of it all. Talking with Gus Morales here on the Jeff Santos show of Badass Teachers in Massachusetts, based in Western Massachusetts. And the fact is that, it doesn't get to Boston. It doesn't get to New York media or Washington media. And it just goes out the window. And of course, they then talk about unions as if it's some, communist group.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really pertain to the fact that we, work a 40-hour work week. And if it wasn't for unions, you wouldn't have that, or an 8-hour work day, or vacation time and a half, et cetera. Right. And of course, nobody even talks about that because most of the media is non-union.
If they were journalists, and I'm talking about the big media, but the small media,
right,
but the big media especially, if they were actually journalists, they would be covering the ethics of what's happening with Jim Pizer, who is our Secretary of Education, and Paul Sagan, who is our chairman on the Board of Education, and their ties to the charter schools that they're promoting. Their financial ties, not ties like they know people, but their actual financial ties. They've served on boards of some of these charters that they're pushing. It is so unbelievably unethical, as unethical as Mitchell Chester, our Commissioner of Education, being associated very directly with the Park Consortium. That is bothersome to me. The fact that he's pushing a test to our student population, a test that we know is flawed, a test that we know, just like every other high-stakes test, is flawed and owned by Gates and Pearson, and it's all one big collaboration. And they're pushing that on public schools. So ethics violations all around for everybody, and not a single media story about that. That to me is amazing. If this were any other profession, any other situation, this would be covered like crazy.
Well, it's a real tragedy, and what we're dealing with here in corporate media, and we see it all the time, not only in how they cover the political races, with the Trump versus Sanders and the ridiculous amount of time that is given to Donald Trump, and of course the people who are responding to after you spent all the time on, and this is on some of the more progressive so-called networks on television, you end up with people spending all the time on the Republicans, and then you get a little bit of news on the Democratic side, and it's mostly representative associated with the Clinton campaign. Hardly fair,
Absolutely.
to say the least.
Absolutely.
Talking with Gus.
Agree with you more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just outrageous, and this is what we have as a general media today. Talking with Gus Morales of Badass Teachers here on the Jeff Santos Show. I want to get to this issue, though, of the charter school, because there's going to be an initiative coming up. Talk to me about that, because, what Baker is looking to do is to increase charter schools. This is exactly what has been happening with other Republican governors around the country. And again, Democrats go to this, too. We know what Andrew Cuomo is about. And the fact is that it's just the way people are looking at education today. Unions have been pushed aside or been basically said, well, you have to submit to what the corporate Democrat is about. And we understand who's running for president. And this is really problematic. Your thoughts here before we go to break?
Yeah, I'm anti-establishment on so many levels. This is, once again, why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders. The establishment Democrat might as well be a Republican, like many people before me have already said. But what I would like to do is tell your listeners probably a very shocking number. This year, this fiscal year 2016, the charter schools will be taking $400 million roughly from the public schools in Massachusetts.
$400 million.
Not the country, $400 million in Massachusetts alone. Boston by itself is losing close to $120 million to charter schools this year.
We're right back. That's insane. Stay right there, Gus. We're right back with Gus Morales. This is insane, folks. Right here in the city of Boston. $400 million.
Right now, one of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is how we raise money for our campaigns. Secretary Clinton has several super PACs. She has raised, just in the last reporting period alone, $15 million from Wall Street. Not to mention giving speeches behind closed doors to Wall Street firms for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, what I kind of think is, if somebody is going to be paid $225,000 a speech, it's probably a great, wonderful speech that she would want to share with the American people. I am very proud to tell you, we do not have a super PAC. We don't want the money from Wall Street or corporate America. What we have done in this campaign in terms of fundraising is literally revolutionary. We have received, this is really unbelievable, something I never in a million years would have thought could have happened. We have received, up to this point in the campaign, 4 million individual contributions. That is more contributions than any candidate in the history of this country at this point in a campaign. So to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, this campaign, which, by the way, do you know what the average campaign contribution is? $27. So I am not indebted to Wall Street, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry. I'm indebted to millions of people for that $27. So to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, this campaign truly is a campaign of the people, by the people, and for the people.
It's 23 minutes past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show. A little Rolling Stones for you here on this Teacher Tuesday segment, brought to you by our friends at Badass Teachers in the AFT. The phone number to join us, 772-925-8206. We're talking with Gus Morales of Badass Teachers here in Massachusetts. And, you know, you were talking about the fact that $400 million cut. I mean, I look at the entire charter school movement as a way to destroy what people have been fighting for years in terms of public schools. And the fact that we have leaders in the Democratic Party that are not standing up to these folks, that are being bought off, as in the case of Secretary Clinton. And Senator Sanders needs to speak out about this if he wants to get more votes from teachers and students alike. The fact is that this is unbelievable. You have President Obama, you know, appointing people that are charter school folks. You know, I mean, it goes on and on and on. Extremely.
What I would, you know, I always make sure I catch myself when I'm talking about charter schools. I want to be very clear with anyone listening. I'm against the charter schools. I'm not against the charter school students. I'm not against the charter school families. I'm not against the charter school teachers.
Sure.
The teachers they're working there, a lot of them because they have to. And how do I know this? Because I talk to a lot of charter school teachers. I'm not some idiot that doesn't talk to people. Just because I'm on the different side of the aisle doesn't mean I'm I see them as my enemy. I see the charter school movement, the people promoting the charter school movement, I see them as my enemy, but not in a sense like where I'm going to go and take up a sword and start fighting them. I see them as an enemy to public education, and so I feel compelled to defend public education because I want, when I have my own children, I want them to go to public schools. I don't want to have to have two separate facilities. What we have right now with the charter schools is a stark contrast to Brown versus Board of Education. We have separate but equal, and that is so wrong. And I can't believe that 60 years after Brown versus Board of Education, this is where we are as a country, that we're creating a two-tiered track for education for the haves and the have-nots. Because most of the people that end up in charter schools are kids that have parents that can actually get them there. A lot of charter schools don't have busing, so who do you eliminate almost exclusively, automatically? You eliminate the absolute bottom of the pool. You eliminate them automatically from attending your charter school, not because you said, hey, you can't come to my charter school, but because you've made it an impossibility for them to attend your charter school. So there's all these things that they do, and you know, you and I were talking in the break, and you said it was the scummiest thing, and I could not agree with you more. As I had said earlier, we're losing this year alone $400 million to the charter schools in the state of Massachusetts. Boston is losing close to $120 million this year. Holyoke, Massachusetts, a very small city, is losing $9.5 million out of its already meager budget. Where does that leave the public school kids? So you hear all these advertisements about, oh, there's 30,000 students on a waiting list to get into charter schools. First of all, it's a lie. But let's take that number, 30,000 students. There's 1 million public school students in Massachusetts. What about the million students? What happens to them when they lose $400 million? Yeah. What happens to them when they lose $400 million from their budget? So we're sacrificing all the public school students on the altar of charter schools. And that, to me, is just the most inappropriate thing. And that any Democrat can actually support this is, to me, mind-boggling.
It is so sad. And I think that we have got to a point now where we have more and more kids that, don't know where their futures are. And, it reminds me of an old movie, The Grand Canyon, where a young African-American thinks that, being 19 is the end of his life. Right. If you don't have even an inkling of how you're going to get to high school and graduate high school, and then maybe have a chance to get a chance to go to college and have a degree and figure out a way to do it. I mean, with the costs of going to a 4-year school, particularly if it's a private, and even the public schools, as we all well know, is a very expensive situation as well. I mean, for so many young kids, and that's why I think you see the 1,000 protesting yesterday in the Boston Common, because they feel that they're screwed. And
this has all been well orchestrated. This isn't some happy accident. This has all been done.
No.
This has all been set up so that the power elites stay in power and everybody else stays at the bottom. Because what can you do if you're a poor kid coming from a poor neighborhood and your whole family's poor and you don't really have a safety net? What do you do to get to college? Take out a $100,000 loan, and when are you going to pay that off? So you're basically selling people into slavery with the idea that higher education is going to be their salvation. That's a fallacy that's been promoted for way too long. I never tell my students, you're all going to go to college. I never tell them they're not going to go to college. What I tell them is they're going to do whatever they need to do to survive, because these kids are dealing with a reality that most people cannot understand. Everybody says, let's protest Walmart, and I want to protest Walmart. But you know what happens when you're poor? You have no choice but to shop at Walmart. Where do you get the money to shop at another store? There's a Walmart near every big city, and so the folks who live at the bottom are forced to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. And I know I've been there. When you got to choose between buying a couple loaves of bread or one loaf of bread, what do?
Yeah.
You choose the 2 loaves of bread. It's a really hard decision. Even though, as I'm doing it, I know I shouldn't be. Like, I should fight it. But, man, I got to eat. And so we've got a lot of people who are in that situation. So as we're offering critiques about charter schools and all that, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to offer a plan B for them. And we haven't done that yet. I
agree with you 100%. We're going to do this again, Gus. Gus Morales, Massachusetts Badass Teachers. Thank you, my friend. Always great catching up with you. We got to do more on this. Thank you, my friend. We're right back.
I don't go around this country sitting in mansions, collecting millions of dollars, hearing the woes of billionaires. There are other more important issues that I've got to worry about. And we listen to young people, and this is what young people are telling me. They're saying, Bernie, how does it happen that we have to end up $30,000, $50,000, $80,000 in debt for the crime of trying to get a decent education? What I ask of you and I ask of the American people is think outside of the box, think outside of the status quo. Take a deep breath and just ask yourself this question. Everybody here knows, everybody in America knows, that in order to compete in a competitive global economy, we need the best educated workforce in the world. Correct? All right. This is kind of a no-brainer, To have the best educated workforce, we have got to encourage young people to get all of the education that they need. We should not be punishing people for getting an education. We should encourage people to get an education. You want to hear crazy? Here's crazy. Talk to a young person in Iowa, went to college for 2 years, $60,000 in debt, dropped out of school. A young woman in Burlington, Vermont, my city. Her dream was to go to medical school. She accomplished that dream. Now practicing primary health care. She has $300,000 in debt. A young dentist in Iowa, $400,000 in debt. It is crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So we're going to do two things. Number one, in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, you cannot just continue to talk about first grade through 12th grade. The world has changed. First grade through 12th grade was a great idea 50 years ago. You had a high school degree 50 years ago. You can go out and earn a good living. That world has changed. So when I talk about public education today, it must mean free tuition at public colleges and universities. Some people say, oh, this is a radical idea. It is not a radical idea. It is not a radical. I mean, right now, tuition, college education in Germany, Scandinavia is free. All right, and it's free because they understand that the future of their countries depend on young people getting the best education that they can. So this is not a radical idea. In fact, I'll tell you this. Some of you may not know this. 50 or 60 years ago, you could go to major and excellent public colleges and universities in America virtually tuition-free.
A little Coldplay for you here on the Jeff Santos Show. 772-925-8206, the phone number to join us. We will be getting back the 844 number soon, folks. I promise you. Sooner rather than later. Our next guest comes to us from Florida today, where he is around the country with the Essential Bernie Sanders and the book that explains his vision for America. He is a author of the book, Sanders Surrogate, and a great friend of the program. Jonathan Tassini joins us. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today. Now you are in Florida, and so you're much warmer than we are. Thank you for spending time with us.
I know. Well, it's supposed to get really warm when I left home in New York, but yeah, it's pretty warm here. It's true.
Indeed. Well, I wanted to ask you, we had yesterday one of your colleagues on, Mr. Cohen, former CWA president, and he understands this, but this idea of the Clinton Clinton campaign, is just outrageous. But this is, as some are saying, the way that the Clinton campaign operates. They try to take an issue and, has a little bit of truth to it, and then make that your entire policy. Explain for those who heard on Sunday night that Senator Sanders, a long advocate of making products in America, keeping the industry alive, voting originally in 2008 for the bill. And now Secretary Clinton said, I'm for the automotive workers, and he is not, as it's that black and white. Your thoughts?
It's such a, if I wasn't involved directly in it, I would be laughing because it's such a farce, and it's such a, it shows also how toothless the media is because they just sort of parrot it and just regurgitate it, and because they don't read, they don't think, they know nothing about the issue, certainly not about trade or NAFTA or the auto bailout. And that said, even the traditional Washington Post called out Clinton on that claim, saying they stopped just short of saying that she was lying when she said that. And so here's the truth. Bernie is the most pro-worker candidate out there. And I'll say I'm a member of the United Auto Workers because of the union that I affiliated with them in 1992. And yesterday I was on CNN. I pulled out my union card. I was debating this issue in the afternoon. I said, this union card, and I would never go against something that would hurt auto workers in Michigan or Ohio, and it's just simply false. Bernie was for the auto bailout, but what he said very clearly is that what happened is, as traditionally happens in the Senate, the Republicans, first of all, tried to extract all sorts of demands when the auto bailout was voted on its own in December of 2008. And what they wanted to do, essentially wage cuts on the part of workers. They wanted to extract, basically hammer down wages. And the Democrats basically said no. So what happened was that money eventually got sectioned into the larger bailout of the banks, the $700 billion, which Bernie was just straight out against. For all the reasons that your listeners know, he just said we should not be bailing out Wall Street.
It's outrageous that this is the way we have it. We're talking with Jonathan Tassini here on the Jeff Santos Show. We're going to try to correct this crackling phone line, but we'll try to make that work in a second here. No worries.
I'll add one other thing, since this is an important thing. This is very important to point out. Here's the reason that the Clinton campaign is lying about this and trying to grab onto this, because if we actually debate the real issue of what's hurting workers in Michigan, Ohio, it's trade. It's the bad trade deals. All of them Clinton supported. I mean, it was Bill Clinton that pushed through NAFTA, and Hillary Clinton supported all these deals. And the only reason she's lying about her position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which she had called the gold standard of trade agreements, is because she knows she can't win the Democratic primary by being for it. And that's the real issue of what's hurting workers there. And Bernie has been against all those trade agreements going back to when he was a member of Congress in the 90s.
Well, look, we have a situation here where, the Clinton family, the Clinton campaign went after Obama. They went after other candidates in the 1990s on the Democratic side. This is how they play. They play a rough and tumble, way of politics. It's very reminiscent of the Republican Party. And this is what you get, because you get a lot of Republican policies when you have the Clinton administration. Look, whether it's, Wall Street issues or the focus on a no-fly zone, et cetera. Let me ask you this, Jonathan, because to me, a lot of people are focused on these next few states of Illinois and Ohio, and of course Michigan today. The issue of trade is a black and white issue as it can between Sanders and pretty much the majority of Clinton's people who have even endorsed her. There are some people that have basically sold out and who have endorsed her. But, the people who are for Hillary Clinton are for these big trade deals. They're internationalist. They're corporatist.
That's exactly right. They're all for it. And in fact, in a moment of honesty, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Tom Donahue, said in a speech at a conference, he said, don't worry, folks, Hillary Clinton is just saying this because it's the primary. When she's president, she'll be for these trade agreements. And everybody knows that. It's like a fraud that's being perpetrated on the American people.
There's no doubt. All right, I want to take a call. Let's go to Mark in San Francisco, who's been holding for quite a while. Mark, you're next with Jonathan Tassini of the Sanders Campaign and the author of the great book, The Essential Bernie Sanders and His Vision for America. Go ahead, Mark, you're next. There's no doubt, and you know, my feeling is that there is a lack of understanding of who truly Hillary Clinton is and her progressive credentials, and Jonathan, I think that what needs to be said here is that there are a number of people in the Democratic Party who think that Hillary Clinton is going to move to the left on some of these issues if she's the nominee. She's not moving anywhere. In fact, if she's moving anywhere, it's to the Republican Party issues because she thinks that she can triangulate. That's the history of the Clintons.
Yeah, and let's be very clear. When she says, and nobody really digs into this, what this means, when she says, I'm the person that can get stuff done. What she means is not the political revolution that Bernie's talking about. It means making deals with Republicans, and the way that happens is, and I'm going to predict this right now, that if God forbid she is the president, she will cut deals with the Republicans that will continue to cut Medicare, Social Security, the other social services, and she'll say, well, that's what we have to do for the sake of compromise. That's what's going to happen. And I can predict this today, and that would be really damaging for millions of people. You know, the Clintons were the people who pushed through welfare reform, so-called welfare.
Of course, 1996. Yeah,
that's right, and all sorts of other things. It's just, it's really a complete scam. It's a complete scam.
Well, there's a big race today, and there's some big ones next week. And people who are undecided need to get out and vote in the states of Michigan and Ohio and Illinois and Florida and Missouri as well. We're going to come back, take more of your calls. David in Sacramento, you'll be first in the deck for Jonathan Tassini. It's The Essential Bernie Sanders and His Vision for America. That's the book. Go out there and purchase it, folks. Be right back.
We live in a world today where there are several 100 million people starving to death. They're starving to death right now.
All over this country today, there is a certain demoralization. And the demoralization is that some people believe that what goes on in the White House and what goes on in the Congress reflects the will of the American people. And by assembling here today as the Rainbow Coalition and its other groups from 46 states in America, what we are saying very loud and clear is that Ronald Reagan and his billionaire friends do not represent America, but we do.
In some of the largest cities in America, 50% of the kids are not graduating high school. The cost of college education in this country is zooming up, so you have to be a wealthy person to send your kid to college. There was once a dream that my parents had and many people's parents had, that if you work hard and go to school, you can get a college education.
But what people like this gentleman do not know is, for example, that in Scandinavia, in Sweden, you've had socialist governments for decades, then in fact that country is probably in most respects more democratic than the United States. They have 80 or 90% of the people voting. They have strong labor unions. They have a more open media. They have a healthcare system guaranteeing healthcare to all of the people. Not to say that that's a utopia.
But at a time when the wealthiest people of this country have seen a tremendous increase in their income, while at the same time the standard of living of working people and poor people has declined, I will be damned if I will vote for a proposal which will stick it to the middle class and the working people. And Mr. Speaker, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with a president and a Congress which allows 5 million children to go hungry, 2 million people to sleep out on the streets, cities to become breeding grounds for drugs and violence. And they say, we're getting tough on crime. If you want to get tough on crime, let's deal with the causes of crime. Let's demand that every man, woman, and child in this country have a decent opportunity and a decent standard of living. Let's not keep putting poor people into jail and disproportionately punishing blacks. While our children go hungry and sleep out on the streets, lack adequate health care or educational opportunity, the wealthiest people in this country have grown far richer while their tax burden has declined. We have an approach to campaign financing which, to a very large degree, allows wealthy people and major corporations to buy and sell politicians. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and ordinary Americans are shut out of the political system. The United States today is one of 2 nations in the industrialized world that does not have a national health care system. That has to do with campaign finance reform. The United States today, the chief executive officers are seeing their salaries soar, and the gap between the rich and the poor grows wider. 10 million Americans are unemployed. That has to do with campaign finance reform. The system, by and large, is owned and controlled by big money interests, and the President of the United States and much of the Congress does the work of protecting the big corporations and the wealthy people who control the economic and political life of this nation. This country, this great country, this democracy is evolving into an oligarchy. And an oligarchy is a country in which a few people have tremendous wealth and tremendous power and exercise that wealth and that power over all. We have seen a situation where we give huge tax breaks to the wealthy, and you have 2 million people sleeping out on the street. Billions of dollars into all kinds of obsolete weapon systems, and you have 5 million children who are hungry. Let us give hope to people in America.
Welcome back. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you're tuned into. We're talking with our good friend Jonathan Ticini of The Essential Bernie Sanders and His Vision for America, on sale now on Amazon.com and bookstores everywhere around the country. Jonathan, I want to get your thoughts here on how people can tell their friends and particularly young people who have been really excited about the Bernie Sanders campaign, to tell their parents and grandparents, which I think is such a, there's obviously that 45 and under and 45 and older division for Bernie and, versus Hillary, and presumably if he wins the nomination against the Republicans. Talk to me about that and what you think is a way to educate people who have been, I think, bamboozled by the Democratic Party, because a lot of them go back to the days of Kennedy and even Roosevelt. But the Democratic Party of the last 30 years has not been like that at all. And one of the reasons why we're in the problems we face in this country, going back really to almost 45 or 50 years, frankly. Your thoughts?
Well, in terms of young people talking to their friends, part of it is there's communication medium, there's Twitter, Facebook, there's Snapchat, but on the issues, I think that the thing that I found in general is and what I've done as I've traveled around the country, both one-on-one with voters and suggested to other people to say, is the very simple question: are you satisfied with the status quo? And I don't think I would guess 90% of the people would say absolutely not. Now, part of those people are actually are gravitating towards Trump. That's his appeal to a certain segment of, and he's appealing to the worst of us. But when you ask that question, it makes people stop and think, and it, I think, gives an opening to say, okay, well, that's what we're about. We're about destroying the status quo and kicking it to the curb, and that's what the political revolution's about. And I think that's the way you open up the conversation to specifics. Are you satisfied with the status quo?
No doubt. Again, talking with Jonathan Tassini of the Bernie Sanders campaign, as well as author of the book, The Essential Bernie Sanders and His Vision for America. I look at where the differences are, with young people. And, we saw it today in Boston. Just spoke to a Sanders supporter who happens to be a badass teacher, based here in Massachusetts, about the 1,000 young high school students who outside were protesters for the cutbacks in Boston City schools. Now, here is a situation, in my opinion, where the Sanders movement is not only going to help local students and so forth. And this is, I think, part of the political revolution that Bernie Sanders is talking about, that brought out those 1,000 kids yesterday. And I think that there is, is a really interesting point that we're not, the media, particularly the national media, mainstream media, is not really understanding what this is all about. Talk to me about this. You've spent time with Bernie. You've written about him. This is exactly what he means by getting millions of people to come out, sometimes for the first time, to be involved. And some of these students aren't obviously old enough to vote yet, but they're engaged.
They are very engaged, and the national media doesn't. I'm not sure actually that they don't all understand it. I think in some way they do understand it, and they just have incredible disdain for it because it challenges their own sort of status, if you will, and then taking down the elite means taking down these traditional media types as well. And I think that, I guess the way I would put it is, what's happening is these two streams are coming together. Bernie Sanders and this movement is connecting with a whole lot of, as I said, dissatisfaction with the status quo. And as I think Bernie used to say, and I think it's not a bad thing for him to keep saying this. He sort of got off of this, and so if I was saying this to him right now, I would say, go back to your point that if you like the status quo, there's a candidate for you. He used to say that a lot in the beginning, and I think that's a great line because people then understand. People think in slogans and short sentences, and every good slogan has a lot of heavy meaning behind it, and I think that is true when you say that about Clinton. She is the candidate of the status quo.
No doubt. I mean, I think the other part of this, too, is that, you have a scenario where a lot of people, if Bernie Sanders is not the nominee, are going to, stay home. They're going to potentially vote for Donald Trump, who's the outsider, even though he is xenophobic and racist and everything else. There is an understanding here that people want dramatic change, not just a little tweak here and there. Oh, well, come on over to our side. We'll do a lot of what Bernie is going to say. Well, don't give me this BS because, these are the same people, that ran away from President Obama's initiatives in 2014, contributed to, stopping the real Obama revolution and ended up with Rahm Emanuel as the chief of staff, which stopped everything from moving forward with the quote unquote Obama revolution. So, I mean, how can people even have any sort of confidence that, you would inherit some of the people from Bernie Sanders to do what? Just to get a little bit?
Well, I think I'm not sure that people who support Bernie will vote for Trump in big numbers. I do think you're absolutely right. They will just stay home. And the enthusiasm, there's been stuff written already about this. The level of voter turnout has been relatively, it's not at the 2008 level. And there's no question that to the extent there's enthusiasm, it's because of Bernie and not Clinton. And if I think there's going to be a tremendous drop in enthusiasm if she does end up being the nominee, and those people are just going to stay home. They're just not going to show up to the polls. And I think that it guarantees, God forbid, a Trump or Cruz presidency, and that is somewhat reflected in the polls that show that Bernie does better against either of those two Republicans than Clinton does.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think what is happening basically is that, people want to see something different in their political campaigns and political leaders. And they see that dramatically, and they see the history of Bernie Sanders, going back to the days of marching in 1963. Jonathan, it's always great having you on the program, my friend.
Again, good to be here.
Congrats on the book. Yes,
right,
yes, indeed. And we look forward to doing it again.
Take care. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for watching us in New York City and online at revolutionradionetwork.com and jeffsantoshow.com. You can always check out our video 24 hours after the fact at jeffsantoshow.com. For Shane and Sarah and Gio and Freddie Santori, my name is Jeff Santos. And for those on video, time for me to say, I gotta go.